Welcome to episode 3 of this tower defense game, and in this episode I'll show you how to make the towers shoot, so let's get started. So what we'll start off by doing is opening up the enemy script, because we will change some things in here. So first off, up here I'll add a public int called health, and I'll set this to 1 as a default value, and then I'll make the current waypoint public, so that our towers know how far our enemies have gotten, and that's all in here. Now we'll head back out into Unity and we will create a new script. So create a monobehavior script, which we are going to call projectile. Now open that up. In here we'll delete the comments and the start function, and then we'll add a public float called speed, which I'll set to 8 as a default, and a public transform called target, which will be one of the enemies. And then in our update function we'll do if target is equal to null. Well, then we will just destroy ourselves. So we'll do destroy game object and we'll return. But if not, well, then we will do vector3 direction equals parentheses target position minus transform.position.normalized. And then we'll do transform.position plus equals the direction times the speed times time.delta time. Then if we also want to rotate our projectiles, we will do float angle equals mathf.atan2, where we'll input direction.x and direction.y, and then we'll multiply this with mathf.rad to degree, so it becomes degrees. And then we can do transform.rotation equals the quaternion.euler, where we will input 0, 0, the angle, which I'll minus with 90 because of our arrow sprite pointing up in the air. So maybe you don't have to do minus 90 if you have a sprite pointing in the right direction. Then I'll also do if vector2.distance, where I'll input transform.position, and the other position will be the target.position. And if that's under 0.15, well, then we'll do enemy e equals target.getComponent enemy, and we'll do e.health minus equals 1. And if the e.health is less than or equal to 0, well, then we can destroy the target.gameObject. And under this we'll do destroy gameObject. So this is the projectile which will also be destroyed. Now that's all for the projectile script. So let's head back out into Unity, where we will now create the tower script. So I'll right click out here and go to create and do a monobehavior script, which I'm going to call tower. Now open that up. In here again we'll delete the start function and the comments. And then we will add a public float called range, and I'll set this to 3 as a default, so the range which the towers can shoot at. And a public float called fire rate, so how fast it will shoot. And I'll set this to 1 as a default. Then we need a public game object called projectile prefab, and a public transform called fire point. Then we need a private float called fire cooldown, which I'll set to 0. Now in our update function we can do fire cooldown minus equals time.delta time, and we can do enemy target equals find best target, which is a function we will create in just a minute. And we'll also do if target is not equal null and fire cooldown is less than or equal to 0. Well, then we will shoot, and this is a function we'll create too, and we'll shoot the target. And we'll also do fire cooldown equals 1f divided by the fire rate. Now let's create these two functions. So first we have the find best target, which will be an enemy function, so we return the enemy, and we'll call it find best target, like that. In here we'll first get all of the enemies, so we'll do enemy array enemies equals gameObject.find objects of type, and the type will of course be enemy, like so. Then we can do enemy best, we can just call it, so the best enemy to shoot at. Well, then we'll do float best progress, so the one enemy which is furthest ahead. We'll set this to -1 for now. And then we'll do for each enemy e in enemies, so we loop through all of the enemies. Well, in here we'll check if float distance is equal to vector2.distance transform.position, e.transform.position. So now we have the distance to the enemy, and now we can check if the distance is less than or equal to the range. And if it is, well, then we can do if e.current waypoint is above the other best progress, well, then we can set best progress to be e.current waypoint. and we can set best to be E. And after all of this in the bottom, we can then return the best enemy. Now let's create the shoot function. So we'll do void shoot, where we will have an input of an enemy called target, and then we can simply do game object p equals instantiate projectile prefab, comma, firepoint.position, comma, quaternion.identity. So now we've spawned a projectile, and we'll then do projectile PR, we can call it, equals p.getComponent projectile, and we can then set pr.target to be equal to target.transform. Perfect. That is everything for the tower. So we can now head back into Unity, and in here we can now create the projectiles. So let's go to assets, then go to sprites and go to towers, and let's start off with the archer projectile. So open up the archer, and we have an arrow right here. So I'll drag this into the scene over here, and I'll just make it capital letter A, like that. Then I'll add the projectile script onto here, and let's set the speed a bit down to maybe 6 because it's an arrow. And then let's go back to towers again and go to the wizard, where we will drag the wizard bullet in here, and let's also add capital letter W. Perfect. Let's add the projectile script, and let's keep the speed at 8. Now let's go to assets and go to prefabs, where we can drag both of these over here. Nice. Now we can delete them right here. And let's now open up the archer tower, where we will add the tower script. So do tower, and on here we'll drag the arrow as the projectile prefab, and the fire point will just be right on the tower. So I'll just drag this transform over here. Let's now go to the wizard and do the same thing. So we'll do tower and drag the wizard bullet onto there, and the fire point to be the transform. Let's also change the range for the wizard, because I think the wizard should be better. So I'll set this to a 5 as the range, and the fire rate should be 1.5, so it's a bit faster. And now try to click on the hard enemy, because I want to set the health of this one to 2, so it's actually harder. Perfect. Let's now go to scenes and hit play. And let's make it a large screen, and let's try to place some of these towers. So let's add this one and also this one, and let's hit go. And yep, the wizard handled it all fine. Let's click on go again and see if it can still handle it. Yeah, the wizard is too good. Let's click go again. And yes, finally the archer helped. So we know both of them work. Perfect. I really hope you liked this episode. In tomorrow's episode we will add tower upgrading and costs. So we will add coins, and there will be like a price to all of the towers, and we can upgrade them so they get better. And also I encourage you to go check out my school community, where you will go through my course and learn how to publish a game in only 3 hours. So as soon as you join my community, you can set a timer for 3 hours, and if you do the work, you will have published the game in under 3 hours. So there's a link for that in the description. But yeah, have an amazing day.